Good afternoon, I'm C.A. Grayson, and today we're going to be talking about Fortnite PvE gun and trap perks. The great ones, the decent ones, and the complete and total garbage. Likely if you've just started PvE or Save the World in Fortnite, you're probably wondering, what type of weapons should I use? What kind of perks are good and what aren't so great? Well, my friends, I have some of those questions answered today. One of the great things about perks is you want to actually upgrade certain types of weapons and not others. When you're first starting off, you're going to get grays, greens, and blues. You really don't want to put a lot into these weapons, and basically I feel like these are put there to just kind of lay out what type of weapons you might like and get used to the shooting in the game and the tutorial. But for those that want to know, hey, what is a good perk? With most guns, you want to always have crit chance paired with crit damage, and you want those two together because otherwise it's going to be a wasted roll. And let me explain that a little further. So crit chance by itself is actually useful, but it's exponentially better with crit damage. Unfortunately, if you just get a crit damage roll by itself, it's utterly pointless. It's a wasted roll. If you have crit chance, it's actually better than just getting crit damage by itself. One of the most important things to keep in mind when choosing guns later on, and these are when you're going to get your epic and legendary tier weapons, or for those of you that don't know what that is, your purples and your oranges, you want to make sure that you have one of each element to be effective against elemental mobs. Now, this far in the game, if you know what an elemental mob is, you've obviously seen the nature mobs, the fire mobs, or the water mobs. Why it's so important to keep this in mind is you have a chance to do 100% damage instead of only, say, 50% damage with a physical weapon. Energy is okay. However, you only get 67% damage across the board on everything instead of a potential 100% damage. So if you do the math, 100% is better than 67% any day of the week. So let's actually take that a step further and break down each elemental gun and how it affects the opposing elemental mob. Let's take a look at fire. So a fire elemental weapon, you're going to create 67% damage against another fire elemental. Now, as opposed to the fire versus fire, which you would actually think you'd create less damage, wrong. The least amount of damage to a attacking element of fire would be water. The water mob is actually only going to take 25% damage as opposed to the 67% against a fire mob when you're attacking with fire. Now, the best damage on an opposing elemental mob is going to be nature. When you're shooting with a fire weapon, you're going to do 100% damage to a nature mob. Now, moving over to the water elemental weapon, when you're attacking with water, whereas you only did 25% damage to water with a fire weapon, let's flip that. So if you're attacking with water, you're going to do 100% damage to a fire elemental, whereas water versus water, much like the fire, and with all of the elementals, you're going to do 67% to the same type of elemental. So water versus water, 67%. And then the least amount of damage from a water elemental gun is nature. Nature's only going to take 25% damage with a water elemental weapon. With nature, as you might have guessed, nature's going to do 67% to nature. So across the board, same element weapons versus same element mobs are going to do 67% damage to said mobs. With nature, you're only going to do 25% damage to fire, and at 100%, nature is most effective against water elementals. With all this in mind, one important side note is that some specialty or niche weapons will actually be ones that don't apply to this logic. For example, let's take a look at the Snowball Launcher. With the Snowball Launcher, you could get a plus 30% damage to slow and snared targets. And then if you look below at the last perk, you can see that there's Water Snare. The Snare pairs with the 30% extra damage, and on top of that you get a water element, which makes this a great weapon because of the combination rolls that work together. So when looking at specialty weapons, if you like the way it fires and it has a neat ability like this that actually in combination creates a unique and well thought out weapon, definitely go for it. Now, looking at traps, one of the great things about the later patches with Fortnite PvE is that with Fortnite traps, you can't really go wrong, and they're used for different things. With push traps, really what you want to look at is durability, basically how long it's going to last, and its reload speed. The most important thing with your wooden floor spikes is the reuse speed and the flat trap damage. The most important thing to remember with the wooden floor spikes when looking at the perks is durability rolls are complete and total crap. This is because wooden floor spikes already have high durability, making this a complete and total waste. For retractable floor spikes, the most important thing to remember with this is the damage and the reload speed. With the next three, we have wall darts, ceiling traps, and dynamos. You all want high damage rolls, or you can also replace high damage rolls with a decent crit chance and crit damage together, much like we mentioned earlier with the great gun perks. This applies to all traps that I've mentioned damage rolls. You can replace this with the crit chance and the crit damage together. I hope this has been helpful for all of you. If you have any questions, feel free to do so in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more information on Fortnite PvE, as we'll be releasing more in the weeks to come. Have a great day, and thanks for tuning in. Again, I am C.A. Grayson, and we'll see you next time.